Welcome to Electric Libertyland, here on the Lions of Liberty podcast, your weekly shot of culture, comedy, and liberty with your host, Brian McWilliams.
Oh, yeah, get the boogie fever on this Wednesday, everybody. Hope everybody out there in Liberty Land is doing well. This, of course, is the electric version of that Liberty Land. So welcome, everybody, to Electric Liberty Land, episode number 7. And that means you can find this at lionsofliberty.com/ELL7. A quick reminder, guys, at the top of the show, please follow us on Twitter at Lions of Liberty. Please do listen to our Monday and Friday podcast. Monday, of course, interviews done by Mark Clare, the in-depth personages in the Liberty movement. Just heard a great interview with Jordan Peterson, Dr. Jordan Peterson. Do not miss that one. Fantastic episode. And, of course, Felony Friday. On Friday, John Odermatt looks at some of the injustices within the justice system. And just actually recently had J.B. Lubin on, who is my guest today. He's going to join me a little later in the show, because there's some things, as always, that I want to hit at the top. But before I do that, let me encourage everybody to also check out some of the new things we have at Lions of Liberty, which are T-shirts. Very cool stuff. We got some Spock T-shirts in there. Live long and live free. We got some roaring stuff. It's all good, baby. So go to lionsofliberty.store. You can see all the cool T-shirts there. And additionally, we have a new way to support the podcast. And that is that we are doing via Podbean our own little support program to help us grow the show and to keep pumping out quality content, keep the lights on at the studios, keep us deep in our whiskey. So you can check that out, lionsofliberty.com/support. And yeah, please be a generous patron of our efforts. I guess it's the best thing I can think of to call them right at the top of my head there. Probably not the biggest enticement to fund our program, but anyway. So let me hit some stuff at the top of the show here. First things first, Meryl Streep is at it again. Yes, Meryl Streep, who gave one of the most annoying speeches I've ever heard in my entire life at the Golden Globes when she won it was like an award for, I think, overall achievement or something like that. But she is back with a brand new edition of Meryl Streep pats herself on the back in front of an audience full of sycophants and people that think the exact same as Meryl Streep does. This most recent endeavor down, hey, isn't Meryl Great Lane, took place as a gala for the Human Rights Campaign, which is a LGBTQ group, and which is kind of funny because she got this award. It was like the Ally for Equality. Even though, if we're being perfectly honest, I looked at some of Meryl Streep's charity work. It doesn't seem like she's really done jack or S. I'm trying not to curse too much this episode. It doesn't seem like she's done jack to go out of her way to really help the LGBTQ part of the world or anybody in it. Granted, I guess she's in the arts, so anybody in the arts is automatically considered a friend to the gay populace. But mostly what she's been giving money to is, it's just arts programs and museums and stuff like that. And, women's directing workshops. So, whatever. I guess Meryl Streep's a draw in this day and age. And again, it's kind of funny because we have to point out that Donald Trump has been on the side of the LGBT community forever. He's constantly saying that he supports them. He's went out of his way to wave a rainbow flag during his campaign speech, and all of the hatred towards him from the gay populace just boggles my mind. I don't understand it. It doesn't make any sense to me. And so it's kind of funny that they are now inviting Meryl Streep to come and speak. And again, she goes out of her way to bash Trump in front of this audience that is just he's slobbering at the bit to have something new to clap and applaud about for Trump. Now, what she said at this most recent gala was this. She said, I am the most overrated, overdecorated, and currently I am the most overberated actress of my generation. Really? Most overberated? Number one, you brought it on yourself. And number two, you knew exactly what you were doing when you did it. You knew you were going to get tons of accolades from all of the little teetotalers. No, not teetotalers, they're drinking. But all of the little, people that are nipping at your heels and just love you so much and can't go out of their way enough to kiss your ass. So she knows what she's doing this entire time. And then she goes on to say this, and I thought this was really funny. It's terrifying to put the target on your forehead. And it sets you up for all sorts of attacks and armies of brown shirts and bots and worse. Armies of bots? I'm sorry, Meryl. Are there people programming robots to attack you? Is this like the Saturday Night Live commercial where the robots are attacking old people because they need their medicine for fuel? And you can't escape their arms because they're made of metal. And robots are strong. Because that's what it certainly seems like. It's just so stupid. Okay, so brown shirts and bots and worse. And the only way you can do it is if you feel you have to. You don't have an option. You have to. So she goes out of her way to call anybody that's responding to her criticism of Trump, which was absurd, a brown shirt. Essentially a Nazi. The brown shirts, what they called Nazis early on. And then, of course, when pushed for comment from the Associated Press, she had nothing to follow up with. But I just love how she's saying she's so brave to go out of her way. It's like, you're not brave. You're not doing anything. You're saying what most of the people you know, if not all of the people you know, agree with. And again, you're doubling down on this crap. And now you made yourself into a martyr. Somebody please call Mel Gibson because we got a new female Jesus form for the Passion of the Christ. Bloody her up. Put the crown of thorns on her head. Because Meryl Streep's out there. She's ready to be crucified, everybody, for the sins that the self-perceived sins that the left is being crucified for in supporting LGBTQ rights, which Trump has no issue with. It frustrates me to have to come on and really defend Trump in this way, but I just can't stand this, and I just wish they'd knock it off. So that was number one. Second thing, I'm getting fired up at the beginning of this show, guys. Fired up at the beginning of this show. The other thing, I don't know about you, but I cannot stand the commercials for the truth, #truth smoking commercials. And I recently saw a brand spanking new one, which put me over the edge because they're already obnoxious and annoying. And by the way, funded, it's like a public institution that was funded by an agreement between basically a lawsuit done by states against the tobacco industry. They sued them because of all the money that was coming from Medicare, paying for tobacco, which I still don't understand how that got approved, and they settled with them. But it's all funded from this money. So it's basically a public foundation, nonprofit that's putting these commercials out, which you see constantly. They've got so much money. They're constantly on the air, and I find them so obnoxious. But the most recent really pisses me off, and I'm going to play it for you real quick, and you'll probably be able to guess why I'm so annoyed by it.
Big Tobacco must love diversity. They love it so much that here they advertise up to 10 times more in black neighborhoods than in other neighborhoods. 10 times. How is that okay? Big Tobacco is really trying to make friends with black folks. I see you. So much that in the past, Big Tobacco called us a market priority. It's not a coincidence. It's profiling. Don't let it go unseen. Enlist at thetruth.com. Be the generation that ends smoking.
So after listening to that, again, I'm presuming you already know why I'm pissed off and why this is such a stupid commercial that there's no actual point being made in this commercial other than to say, hey, a business is advertising in a community that tends to buy cigarettes more, just like any other business would. Look, if you're Lexus, you're going to advertise to people that are more in your brand or more in your who's going to be buying your product. That's just business 101. I mean, give me a break here. You're telling me that because they advertise 10 times more, and it's, by the way, it's not, she's saying it's like black. No. Big Tobacco, yes, black people, sometimes do smoke more. Their communities, but it's not because they're black. It's because those communities typically might be more low income. They also advertise 10 times more in low income white communities, working class communities, because those are the people that tend to smoke more. Probably because they don't have as many other outlets and other vices that they go down in for like the rest of us do. So if you've got that, of course you're going to advertise in that industry. So that's not a point that's being made. And to say that they're a quote unquote market priority, it sounds evil to the idiots of the world, to the leftists of the world that say, oh my God, business is so evil. How can they target these people, making them a priority and advertising to them? Anybody that is in your target market, of course you're going to make them a priority. That just makes sense. I mean, they're not going to say, okay, who never buys our cigarettes and is not likely to buy our cigarettes anytime in the near future? How about 95-year-old women who already have emphysema? Can we get some ads up in the bathrooms at the old folks' homes? Can we do that? Maybe is there a hospital we can slip some into the magazines there? An emphysema today? Now, granted, I know people with emphysema probably have already been smoking, but the point remains the same. Of course, any business is going to say, okay, what's the path that is going to bring us back the most return on our investment? What's our prime audience? Let's make sure we keep up to date and advertise our products there because they've got a choice. If they're going to be smoking, we want to make sure they smoke our brand. It's not like they're going after them because they're pushing to capture this brand new market. Now, granted, companies do that. You do want to expand your market share, of course, into different areas, but especially with smoking at this point in time, smoking companies pretty much know where their bread is buttered. And so it's just a matter of competing within that industry. Just like I'm sure Truth Campaign, you know who else advertises more in low-income communities? Alcohol. It's the same thing because when you have a low income, you're more likely to go in for low-cost vices to make your life seem a little bit better. Can we give them that? Let these people smoke if they want to smoke. Don't push these campaigns out. Oh, and the hashtag for this whole thing, by the way, was stop profiling, which again is incredibly misleading because it makes you think, oh, well, they're racial profiling. And that word automatically, that's a trigger word. That's a trigger word for everybody. Oh, they're racial profiling and that's automatically bad. Meanwhile, no. They're building a business profile, which was every single person who has ever started a business. If you want to get a business loan, that's what you have to do. You have to put together as part of your business plan a profile of who your potential customers are. I'm out here in LA. I'm doing my comedy. I'm doing my public relations. I'm doing screenwriting, though I'm not making any goddamn money at it, but I'm doing screenwriting. And if you're pitching a project, they're going to ask you, what's your potential audience? So I am hashtag profiling who my potential audience would be for my film when I'm pitching it, because that's what people who are investing in these things need to know. Who is going to buy your product? You don't just go out with a product and have no idea who you're marketing it to, or else that product's going to fail. All your advertising dollars are going to be wasted. They're just going to be thrown. You might as well just drop, just like back in the old days of the war, just drop propaganda from a blimp. You're going to have the exact same effect. So this commercial's stupid. Every Truth Campaign commercial, in my opinion, is completely stupid. And I despise the fact that they're constantly on air and that they are government funded. So that was number 2. Let's hit one more topic here real fast, and then we're going to move on to something brand new. Actually, you know what? I'll hit 2. Another quick one I want to talk about. This is in, I believe, Utah. Oh, no, I'm sorry. This is in Georgia. But a Georgia bill would require new ADHD prescriptions every 5 days. I don't have any issues with attention span. Well, I probably do. I don't have any diagnosed issues with attention span. But I know a lot of people who do. Actually, my best friend, he's got a child who happens to have a prescription for ADHD. Very necessary for him. And just in talking to him, this bill would basically make it so that if you have a prescription, whether it's for you, whether it's for your child, you could only have a prescription written for 5 days worth of prescribed drugs. So that means for, your ADHD, your Ritalin, but also for any other drug, essentially. So it's, for any other opiate or any other prescribed drug does not go farther than 5 days. The theory behind this is that it's going to counteract the abuse of opioid prescriptions by making people come back every 5 days. I guess the argument is that you can't sell your whole bottle to people for $20 so they can abuse it. But is it really that big a problem? Like, this is what I always ask myself in these situations. Okay, this guy wants government to step in and create this massive issue for thousands, if not millions, well, not millions, 'cause it's only in Georgia, but for thousands of families and individual users, wherein now You can't get a prescription. Like my buddy was going to go on vacation. And he said, if this was me, I would not be able to go on vacation because they wouldn't give me a prescription ahead of time. He actually had that happen anyway, where his doctor wouldn't give him a prescription, 5 days before it was due, because they couldn't get it filled. And so you go, okay, what am I supposed to do here? My son needs this drug. I can't get it because of this BS regulation you put in place. It's supposed to protect people from abusing it. But at the same time, all it does is affect the vast majority of people who are not abusing it, who really need this. It's the classic case of unintended consequences that happens so often with regulation. And by so often, I mean every goddamn time. Every time they make a provision like this. And of course, ADHD isn't even the target opioid they're going for. This is mostly to combat OxyContin, which as we know, as we see the heroin deaths rising because people get hooked on OxyContin and then they turn to heroin. Oftentimes because they're on disability and are prescribed OxyContin. But anyway, I digress. So it's not even supposed to be affecting the people with ADHD, but it covers en masse everybody to say a prescription cannot be written by a doctor for more than 5 days in advance to prevent, quote unquote, doctor shopping around. And this, by the way, this bill came from a senator named Renee Unterman. She's Republican from a suburb of Atlanta. Again, clearly a woman who does not know what the hell she's doing, what she's talking about. It's like everything. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. So nice try, Renee. You're an idiot. All right, last thing. I'll try to keep this very short, or as short as humanly possible for me. Recently in California, we've had a ton of rain. Now, I live in California, of course. You might remember when I apologized because the rain was coming down so heavily, I was worried it might get caught up in the audio recording and obscure the sound quality. But all of that rain had led to a problem up north of me in Northern California in a town called Oroville. Now, Oroville is home to a dam that actually is responsible for holding back quite a bit of water. Now, in recent years, we've had quite a bit of a drought in California, so it wasn't much of an issue saying, all right, don't worry about the dam. It's probably not going to overflow anytime soon. And a few years ago, though, some environmental groups actually looked at the way the dam was constructed and looked at the outside spill that comes off the side, which basically, it was an overflow chute that would run down a hill. And the issue was that the hill it was running down did not have construction on it to reinforce it with concrete. So because of that, there was a lot of silt, there could be a lot of debris, and this water could run straight down. It could, dig out the dirt over a time period with the force of that water and then flood Oroville and flood many other cities and towns around the area, causing millions of dollars of damage. Now, those three environmental groups brought this to, whoever the regulatory body was that was in charge of this and said, look, we feel very strongly about this. This is going to happen. The body in charge then passed it along to a couple of other agencies that were state-run, including, I think, the Metro Water Agency and another one, who looked at it and said, yeah, you know what? We don't think this is going to happen. Not going to be a priority for us. We're not going to do anything to fix it. Even though to fix this probably would not have cost them that much money or taken that much time, if we're being honest with ourselves. So what happens? You flash forward to this year and this past few weeks, and we've got another 8 days of rain coming up in the forecast. But you flash forward, and sure as hell, we get this massive amount of rain coming in. It fills up everything. The reservoirs are filled to the brim, causes an issue wherein it is an emergency situation in Oroville, where there is so much water coming out of the side spillway that it legitimately is starting to erode away all of that sediment and become an issue where they had to evacuate people from their homes. Now, fortunately, they were able to come in and do an emergency spill-off that lowered the level of water and ran it away. So crisis averted. But again, why is this crisis even something that has to be averted when you were warned ahead of time? Now, I will acknowledge this and give a little bit of a aside here. Environmentalist groups tend to be nonstop with their complaints, with their demands, with coming at you for this, that, and the other. Oh, this is going to harm this. This needs to be fixed. This is going to affect this population of fish. So I can understand why after a while, a regulatory body might go out of the way to say, you know what? You're probably just full of it. And that's not something that's surprising. I'm not saying that they should do that, but I can understand in one way why that would happen. However, let's take a step back and look at this. If this was a privately owned dam, none of this would have ever happened. Because number one, the amount of responsibility you have for that dam, if you're a private company and something goes wrong, you are going to be completely destroyed in the courts. I mean, the people are going to sue you for, God knows, millions upon millions of dollars. The company won't survive. If it does, it's some mega company, which, you know, God knows, it'll knock their stock down to the point where I can probably buy it with the money in my savings account right now. But it would never happen to begin with, because you would go out of your way to make sure it was built to the proper construction codes. You would actually listen to groups coming to you and saying, look, there's an issue here with this, and here is why. And you say, yep, well, I got to fix that. And why would you fix it? Because you're liable, and because even if you have a perfect product or something like this where it's a dam responsible for public safety, you are going to have insurance for that to protect your investment, to protect your property, protect everything else. So the insurance company is not going to insure your project or your company unless you make sure that the project is built correctly, it's up to the standards, and that it addresses any potential dangers that could crop up. So just pointing out, the private market would have kept this from happening. That's the last thing for this little intro. So again, my guest coming up today will be my good friend JB Lubin, my buddy from Penn State, and we're going to get to him just right after a few words from our sponsor.
Hey guys, I know there are a lot of podcasts out there. There's a lot of competition for your ears, and it's hard to find time to listen to everything. But there's one show that I make sure to carve out the time to listen to every single day, and that's the Jason Stapleton program. Jason has been a guest on this show before, and he really does a fantastic job with his show, where he breaks down current events from a libertarian perspective 5 days per week. That's right, 5 days per week. I don't know how he does it, but it's not just a podcast. It's also a live daily studio show, which broadcasts over at jasonstapleton.com. You can, of course, find his podcast on iTunes, on Stitcher. Wherever you listen to this podcast, you should have no problem finding Jason Stapleton as well. And the great thing about Jason's show is that it's so professionally done that you have no concerns about sharing it with your parents, your friends, your family. You're not going to get any of that Alex Jones conspiracy stuff. You're just going to get straightforward talk about libertarian ideals in our rapidly changing world. Be sure to check out the Jason Stapleton program.
Welcome back, guys. So as promised, I am not going to do this entire show solo like last time. I am going to bring in a good friend of mine, fellow Lion of Liberty Pride member and Penn State graduate, JB Lubin, the Pride of Philadelphia. Hey, JB, how's it going?
It's going great, man. Thanks for inviting me.
I'd love to have you.
This is my, I guess, my debut.
Isn't that surprising? It's shocking now, like looking back, I'm like, we've been on a lot of roundtables, but this is the first time I've had you on the show. So my apologies, it's taken so long.
Oh, no worries. I just enjoy the lovely intro music every time. Glad to be immediately after it.
Yes, well, I should hope that you can spread the love, pump it when you're walking down the street. That's what I'm advocating people do nowadays. And then we'll really get this show to take off. Now, you were just on Felony Friday as well. And yes, I encourage everybody to listen to that. That can be found, you can go to, that's Felony Friday episode 58. You were on that, Felony Friday, and you and Odie were talking about one of the many topics you guys hit on that episode was whether or not it is a crime to block traffic, especially because there was a case where an ambulance had to, they had to perform surgery in the ambulance. And I won't go into the details of that conversation too much because people should go just listen to that podcast. But I did want to bring it up because there's a relevant story coming out of Tennessee where a bill was put forth that essentially said if anybody is blocking traffic, like if a protester is blocking traffic, and I'll link to the bill in the show notes, which, of course, as mentioned, you can find that at ELL7, lionsofliberty.com/ELL7. But I'll put the text of the bill in there. It's very short. But basically what the bill says is that if you are driving your car and somebody is protesting, blocking the street, and you hit them, you are not liable for injury or damages. However, right after that line, there's another line that says, if you willfully try to injure somebody, or it's done with willful intent, though, you are liable for their injuries. So, JB, let me ask you, does this bill have any point to it?
I think none whatsoever. Like the way that it's worded, my first thought was I feel like it was giving some type of legal protection to people who might want to, quote unquote, accidentally hit people blocking the road, because we already have several laws in the books to deal with this various situation.
Right. And that's the thing. And the article I was reading about it, basically, it had the headline like, oh, it was like this BS headline basically saying, oh, it just got a lot easier to hit people during protests. But yeah, and I opened it up thinking, oh, did somebody finally make it so you can just like plow down people that are blocking the road? But clearly that's not the situation here. They're just, I don't even know. Like I said, there's already laws on the books that if you're not trying to hit somebody and they're in a public roadway and you're going the speed limit or under, you're probably not going to be liable unless you're drunk. So yeah, I don't understand what the point of this is anyway. But I did think it was funny that it's become a big enough issue that people are actually looking at it and going, we gotta stop this.
Is there any instances of this happening? Do you know? Have you ever heard of like people blocking the road and someone like just running them over?
There was one, and I got a little bit of flack on, when I posted on the old social medias. This was before, actually, I think this is before the Lions of Liberty days. This is before we even really started it. But a few years ago, there were some people doing this. People like to ride bicycles around, and they do it in LA. They do it in every major city. Sometimes a bunch of people riding bicycles will get together and decide, you know what? We want to be huge assholes and block traffic. So what they do is they get in the road, they get on a freeway, or they get on a major thoroughfare, and they ride about 10 miles per damn hour, blocking all the lanes and driving everybody nuts. So in France, they did that. And somebody, I think like a BMW or something, eventually just lost it and was like, enough of this, and stepped down on the gas, probably yelled Vive la France, and then mowed down like 10 of them. And then I guess drove away. I'm presuming after that drove away. So yes, it has happened.
Yeah, I don't know what to say about that. Like, laws would easily remedy that. I know in Philadelphia, I see signs all the time when I'm going on any major like highway or like interstate or, accessory to such that says only motorized vehicles are permitted on this road.
Right.
So don't really have that problem just on the streets of Philly and, trying to go around, you have like 6 bikes in front of you going 10 miles an hour. It can get pretty aggravating. Yeah. Never wanted to kill anyone though, but
I just want to gently maim them usually, actually what I'd love to do, what should be legal? Just give them that little love tap on the back wheel, you know what I'm talking about? My dad used to do it to me growing up. He would buzz the back of my tire, which was fine until the day he buzzed me and I looked backwards and flipped my bike and then smashed my front teeth out, which I guess could theoretically happen if you bump somebody with a car, but who's to say until we try it, guys?
Yeah. What's to say?
Yeah. But yeah, it is aggravating. And yeah, this bill seems like there's absolutely no point to it. But I did agree with the fact that, yes, it is definitely a crime to block traffic and deny people, as people have talked about, in other libertarian podcasts as well. You are essentially detaining somebody and you are hampering their ability to be a free person if you're blocking them in a street and won't let them, have access to get out of their car, to drive the car away. And also in those situations, I would be terrified for my life. So I guess you could justify putting the pedal to the metal if you're saying, well, look, these people are banging on my car with sticks and shouting and shaking my car. If somebody did that to me, maybe then, whether it's willful or not, it's self-defense, arguably.
Well, yeah, if they're presumably threatening you, I feel like you should be allowed to get out of there. I think it's up to them to get out of the way of the car that they're hitting with sticks at that point.
Damn well right. That's why I've created a Mad Max vehicle for myself. All right, so what do you think? Are you ready for some trumping and some dumping?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
All right, because it's time. It's been a little while since I did this. So let's get right into it. First thing I want to talk about is Trump, who he met with the sheriff, Texas, I think it was a Texas sheriff, and President Trump met with this guy and he invited the sheriff of this small Texas county to quote unquote destroy the career of a state senator who sought to ban a controversial law enforcement practice, otherwise known as asset forfeiture, one of the biggest things that we libertarians despise when it comes to, forfeiture of state property and what is or what is not a just use of laws and due process. So, just looking at this on his face, the fact that President Trump comes out and so strongly supports asset forfeiture, I found to be a bit of a surprise. I mean, I guess he has, I guess he just put a bunch of new laws on the books as well that are supporting police officers. But were you shocked at all to see him come out and strongly support asset forfeiture, or was his support of eminent domain over the years kind of a nod that this was something inevitable?
I don't know. Like, now that you mention it, the fact that I guess he's been cozying up with the police force, it kind of does make sense. But it does seem kind of weird that he would have such a strong opinion about something like this.
Yeah.
My thought is only to make himself look good in the eyes of law enforcement.
Yeah, I think you might be right. Well, I think it also, like, he has this quote that's in this article in Politico I was reading, and he's saying that he goes to the state senator that Trump got mad at for putting forth this law that would reform asset forfeiture. Trump says, I told him that the cartel would build a monument to him in Mexico if he could get that legislation passed. Oh, no, I'm sorry. That was the Texas sheriff. That's what the Texas sheriff said to this lawmaker. So I think this is all based in a misconception about what asset forfeiture actually can accomplish. Because if you're talking about, okay, we're going to take away the assets of people that have already been convicted, or we're going to freeze their assets of these people that were, convicted of something, I guess you could understand that. I still don't think you should be able to forfeit all of their belongings, but I can understand a freeze so they couldn't use them during something to escape. But what happens in all this is that so often people that are completely innocent or people that are involved in misdemeanors get wrapped up in asset forfeiture and get their property taken away. And once that property is gone, good luck getting it back.
Yeah, it's quite ridiculous. There's two different kinds, and they just say asset forfeiture like it's one thing. There's criminal forfeiture and civil forfeiture. Mm-hmm. And it's clear, like, criminal forfeiture means that you've been convicted of a crime, and either this property or this money is involved in said crime. So then it becomes, I guess, property of the government. But civil forfeiture, like, the law enforcement can just take your stuff, and then it's up to you to convince a judge that they were in the wrong. It's not innocent until proven guilty in the court of civil forfeiture.
Right, you're operating exactly as a presumed opposite. Guilt. Yeah,
you're automatically guilty. You have to convince this judge that you deserve your stuff back. And, like, depending on your situation, like, all your savings can be frozen. Like, if you own a business, like, your employee pensions can be taken.
Yep.
Now, all these people you used to work for can't get paid, and you've never been convicted of anything.
No, I mean, they could take your house as well. There's an instance a few years ago, I think I was reading that it was somebody had, their nephew or something was a drug dealer, a suspected drug dealer, and the cops came in and they froze their assets and they took their house and under civil forfeiture because it was quote unquote a drug house. And you go, well, this guy's just a nephew. He's got a nephew. His nephew's sleeping on his couch. He doesn't even know this is going on, and you can't prove it's going on. So now this man has nowhere to live, and he's got to go and prove his innocence to prove that he should have his stuff back. And half the time, depending on the county laws, because a lot of stuff goes down nitty gritty, they don't even have, even if when you prove yourself innocent, they still don't necessarily have to give you that property back or those assets back. And that's it blows my mind to think about how this, I don't understand how this procedure ever got started in the first place under any court in the land that would say, oh no, this totally makes sense to do.
Well, there's a couple of reasons, I guess, where it in certain situations, I guess, would make sense. Like, I was doing a bit of research on this, and
how dare you?
And they bring up the instance, like, let's say there was, like, I guess a cartel runner who they were after. They have a warrant, they have evidence, but he's been killed, and maybe he got in a shootout when they were trying to get him. And they have all this money and all this, like, warehouses filled with drugs under his name. Without him being alive, they can't try him. They can't convict him. So they cannot proceed in forfeiture through the criminal forfeiture. So they have to do civil. And I guess in very narrow situations like that, it does in fact make sense, which I feel is why lawmakers are trying to kind of refine this law, so that innocent people aren't getting hurt, and you can still, apply it in situations like that, which just seems like all these lawmakers trying to do, make a law a bit better and, like, remove all this collateral damage from something that might have some useful value.
Well, it's like so many of these laws on the books. It was created, like you said, with a specific instance in mind, where they said, all right, we have to create something that'll allow us to process this specific circumstance. And then you look at all the collateral damage, all the innocent people pulled into it. it makes me think a little bit of the gambling laws that are on the books, and that the way they got the anti-gambling laws, the way this whole thing got started was because they were trying to combat point shaving in collegiate athletics. And that one specific targeted goal for these gambling laws has blown up into, nobody can bet outside of a couple states that happen to have grandfathered in clauses through crony capitalist lobbying or, organizations. And we can't place bets on fantasy football even now is like coming under regulation and attack. So again, one of these laws, what starts off with, I'm sure, even if they are nearsighted, positive ambitions, always gets bastardized. And now it's bastardized to the point where people are losing all of their assets, and it's just going to fund the state, where these cops now, the departments, they almost depend on these funds. Like I was reading another piece which said that the asset forfeiture, when it was created in like 1986, they had something like, $4 million. And then over the past 25 years, they now get something like $4.3 billion a year is through civil asset forfeiture and criminal asset forfeiture. So it's clearly become something that they're using as a means to fund the police departments.
And that there makes me very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It gives them incentive to do this, whether they feel like justified or not, If they even have an inkling that they can get away with this, I feel like they'll try to do it because of this reason.
And it seems like the onus, as we said, to justify the actions is very light. It doesn't seem like they have to do a lot of explaining.
On the side there, you mentioned something. Is like having a fantasy football pool where like you buy in and then the winner takes the pot, is that considered gambling?
It is considered gambling, yeah. And I know there were, and again, I'm not going to go too deep into it because I haven't done a ton of research into it. But yeah, it is considered gambling. I mean, just like you can't run you can't run a poker game out of your home legally. You're not allowed to do it if you're playing for money. Fantasy football is essentially the same. Now, these organizations that run the leagues, I know they've already encountered a lot of legal barriers, even though they might be based in states where it's legal. And the last time I wrote an article about it, this is ages ago now, but they were looking to really regulate it and consider it gambling, because the way they got around it was that they called it a hobby rather than gambling, because they said fantasy football is a skill. They called it a skill. It's a skill instead of gambling. Whereas, gambling, you say, okay, well, it's based on luck. You're just placing a random wager on a team. So the legislators are arguing that no, you're rolling the dice. You don't know how it's going to turn out. It is gambling in the traditional sense. And that's why they're looking to regulate it and to potentially, they were trying to shut it down. So that's what the industry is going up against now. So yes, to do the same thing in your home would be considered illegal gambling if they prove that is gambling by definition. Then yes, you would be violating the law by doing it.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's crazy. So, all right. So what do you give this asset forfeiture, though? Is it a trump or a dump?
I'm definitely dump. Definitely dump for me.
Yeah. Dumping all the way around. Agreed completely. Asset forfeiture is one of the things that, again, just shocking, because it's basically, I find it hard for anybody to actually provide a defense for it. Yet, apparently fear mongering as to drug cartels is the only one they can muster. All right. Yep. Next one up. Let's talk about some brand spanking new news coming out of North Korea and Trump's response / non-response, I guess you could call it. Because he didn't come out strongly. Like, North Korea in the past couple days had launched a missile, technically at Japan, although that's just, whatever way they were facing, it happened to be facing Japan. It didn't do any damage, didn't hurt anybody, but they did launch a missile, and people are considering it a direct kind of thumbing of their nose at Trump, saying, you ain't going to intimidate us. We're North Korea. We've got 6 grains of rice. So his response, though, was not a powerful response as most people expected, going after North Korea and, really assaulting Kim Jong-un in any way. Instead, he basically said that it was, not condoned, and we can't stand for this, but we stand by our allies in Japan 100%. And that was effectively it. So, JB, what did you think of that? Is his response appropriate? Is it inappropriate?
Well, I suppose as being the president, I guess it's a appropriate response. Japan is a longtime ally since the end of World War II, and we have agreements in place of mutual defense, though I feel like it's more one-sided in actuality. So I feel, I guess, as president, he would be obligated to say something in support of Japan. I can't really. He didn't tweet that he's gonna send like the Pacific Fleet over there or anything like that. It was very measured response. It's really, I can't really criticize him too much for it. I don't know about you.
No, I feel the same way, and that's what's kind of cracking me up is so many people. You see these articles and they're saying, "Oh, it's I can't believe he didn't rip them apart." All he said was it's intolerable, and he didn't even mention South Korea, and the South Koreans are all pissed off now because Trump didn't mention that he also stands with South Korea, which of course they're an ally there too. I'm sure Trump just said Japan because he was literally with the Japanese ambassador, or I'm sorry, the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. I think it's like saying.
Yep.
Yes, I did it right. At the time, so clearly he had Japan at the top of his mind. But yeah, I mean, I would much rather see a measured response. So often you see politicians like, look at Gary Johnson, for example. He got called out on not knowing something, but I'd rather have a presidential candidate or a president actively, instead of spouting something out quickly, say, okay, you know what? I'm going to just say something very truncated right now while I look at my options and I think about this. And Donald Trump hasn't been in this position before. People are worried about Donald Trump having his finger on the button. This pretty much, it reassures me a bit that he can have his finger or his hand somewhere near the button and he's not just going to push it all the time.
Like really, what did they want him to say? Like, invading North Korea is off the table. They have nuclear weapons. It's not like Iraq where, just put a bunch of boots on the ground and there's no imminent threat of like nuclear war hanging on the balance here,
Precisely.
We've tried the sanctions, and sanctions don't work without China's help. Like 90% of their commerce goes through China. So you can sanction them all they want. It's doing little good without China's aid. There's not much he can say, because there's not much you can do. And for once, they should probably give Trump credit for not blustering and talking out of his ass, because what is he going to do? The only thing we can do is provide a defense. And that's what we're doing. Especially, he might not have mentioned South Korea, but we're deploying this THAAD missile defense system in South Korea just for this exact scenario.
It's like when, it's like Valentine's Day is tomorrow, which is now going to be yesterday when this episode airs. And, if you love someone enough, you don't even have to say it. That's like Donald Trump in South Korea.
Exactly. We're talking with actions instead of words,
There you go. Yeah. He's giving him flowers instead of just writing a note. So, yeah, I agree. And also, he just had spoken finally with China's president. So that is good news. In that hopefully there was some sort of understanding reached there. Now, whether or not, Trump said, don't worry, I'm not going to antagonize North Korea until we can talk more. Hopefully he did. But maybe that factors into play too, where Trump's even taking an even more measured response because he knows that he needs China to impose further sanctions or to deal with North Korea. So he's going to say, I'm not going to intimidate him. I just had a good conversation with China. I don't need to rile this up and undo everything I've just accomplished over the last few days.
Absolutely. I'm sure the conversation between China's president and what he says about China in public is markedly different.
Oh, I think that's every conversation Trump has.
Yeah, that's just my guess.
Yeah, agreed. Well, I'm going to go ahead and give it a Trump.
Yeah, I'll give that a Trump too.
There we go. Double Trumps. All right. How about another one here? Let's talk about, so especially here in California, I've seen the effects of this immediately. But Trump has, well, quote unquote, Trump's immigration raids, but ICE has really stepped up its raiding, which they say is just their normal tactics, but clearly they have stepped it up because you don't hear about 600 illegal aliens arrested in a week. But, they said some 600 people with raids in certain cities across the country. Los Angeles was one of those where I, of course, currently live. And there have been some protests that had gone, smaller ones in the streets to blocking freeways again, as these people love to do, to protest the amount of crackdown that's been going on. So, JB, what do you think of these ICE agents going in and U.S. immigration's going in and cracking down now, is it something where we should say, well, they're just doing their jobs? Should people be this upset about it? Or, I mean, what would you do, I guess, in this situation?
Well, I guess it depends on how you look at it. 600 seems like a lot, but in the same exact article, they told me in 2015, they arrested 2,000 people in 1 week. So this seems like pretty much the status quo. I don't know what causes certain surges, but this hasn't even been the worst in 2 years. So as far as I'm concerned, ICE is just doing what ICE does. And like I said, in 2015, that was under the Obama administration. Now it's under Trump. I have no information or no evidence to suggest that Trump pushed for this 600 illegal alien detention. You know, maybe this is just how they operate.
Yeah, exactly.
It's hard for me to say. Now, whether it's right or not, I guess would be a different subject. That would mostly for me boil down to how they're finding these people. Is it actually constitutional? Like, is it just like they're just randomly detaining people, like randomly searching homes with like no pretense or no warrants or anything? Like, I would try to find like how ICE determines how do they even find undocumented immigrants to detain. And the only thing I could find is either workplace raids or at home.
Yeah.
So it's like, what makes an ICE, an ICE agent go to someone's home? How do they get this information? How is this decided?
Yeah.
Until I know this, I don't know if this is right, because there could be a lot of people being harassed for no reason just because they might look a certain way or speak a certain way. It's difficult to say without more information.
Yeah, most definitely. And I agree too. What I had read is that there was a lot of home raids and a lot of work raids as well. And I think there's maybe certain public venues where they know they're at, but I'm guessing it's a lot of tips. It's probably social media. It might be work with the NSA, but I don't know for sure either. I don't know if it's gone through legal or illegal means as well, or constitutional or unconstitutional means. I will tell you this though, in California or in Los Angeles here, this is just true story today. So we have a housekeeper. She's here legally from Venezuela, but she said that all of the public transportation was empty today. Empty. She's like, there were 2 people on it. She goes, because everybody was scared that they were going to get busted by ICE because of this recent crackdown. Although that is a really fascinating number. You pointed out though that now we know Obama deported more illegals than any other president, but I did not realize that 600 isn't even as many as were caught and deported in a month. That's pretty interesting to know, and just makes you think, okay, yeah, like you said, ICE is doing what they're supposed to be doing legally. You know, that task force exists for a reason. And despite what we might say, okay, we want open borders, or we want to get rid of the welfare state and then get open borders, or whatever we want to push for in regards to that, the laws as they exist right now say these people are here illegally. And yeah, I mean, if they're doing their job and they're doing it in the constitutional manner, then I guess you can't really say too much about it. And it seems like this is just media attention more than anything, as a concerted effort, or Trump calling the head of ICE and saying, get out there and do your job harder and faster than you were doing it before.
Well, is there any evidence to state that that's exactly what happened? Was there I don't know what department ICE falls under, maybe state, I don't know, justice?
I don't know. But I'm not seeing anything that's saying that Trump, like even in the article I'm reading now, it's not citing anything specifically saying that Trump has told them, get out there this week and crack some heads. It looks like, clearly he's going to be in support of it. Trump tweeted, the crackdown on illegal criminals is merely the keeping of my campaign promise. Gang members, drug dealers, and others are being removed. Now, that doesn't mean that he's necessarily doing anything specific, but yeah, it's just reporting what's happening.
He has anything to do with it?
No. I think he's got bigger things on his mind at the moment than telling ICE to get out there and find people. And also, the thing is too, I guess the only way they could really do an increased amount of action and deportation like this, if we're talking about them getting their information constitutionally and not just randomly kicking people's doors in, which of course would be horrible. I guess that, it has to be something where they already knew these people were at certain places. It said like 75% of them had prior convictions or were already, were suspected of being criminals. So maybe they were tracking them the whole time anyway. And this is just them, certain of these leads coming to fruition one way, shape, or form.
Yeah, it's quite possible.
I just don't know. So that's why it's going to be very hard to give this a grade, but I'm going to ask you to do it. What would you give it, a trump or a dump?
It's tough for me because, like I said, I don't even know if he has anything to do with it. So how can I grade him on it? So, I guess I'll give him a trump because it's the neutral. I'm not going to give him a dump for something I don't even know if he had anything to do with. So yeah. I'll go with trump there.
Yeah, I'm so torn on this one. I want to give him a dump just because the part of me that is against people being terrified and, and having goons burst into their homes and workplaces, I am so against. But yeah, I agree. I don't know either. I don't know how much influence this is. And I side with what you said there, and they're just kind of doing their job. So until the laws change, they are simply enforcing the laws that are on the books. And if people are here illegally, they know this is a risk they're taking, and they actively chose to take that risk when they came into this country illegally or stayed past the point where they were supposed to leave. So I'll also give it a very hesitant trump. All right, one more thing, and then we're going to wrap it up with the one from Mr. Lubin here. The last thing I just want to bring up is not going to be a trump or dump, but it's going to use the same sound effects, because we're going to do a little Rand Pauluses and Minuses. Well, just one Rand Paulus and minus, that is. And that is, I want to talk just really quickly about Rand and Jeff Sessions. Now, Rand did, in fact, vote for Jeff Sessions, even though he had been pretty vocal in criticizing Jeff Sessions earlier, not as much as with Bolton, and that might come into play. And I think he really despised one of Trump's nominees, I think, I can't remember what it was, and I apologize, guys. But anyway, Rand did vote for Sessions, and when he was pushed on why he voted for Sessions, he said that basically the character assassination from the Democrats and the left had annoyed him so much that he decided he was just going to vote for him. So, JB, what are your thoughts on Jeff Sessions and Rand supporting him? And should we give him a Rand Paulus or a minus for his decision to vote for Sessions overall, and considering the fact that he may have done it just out of spite for the left?
I'm just going to come right out and say this is a minus. That's a ridiculous reason to vote for someone for such a pretty important position, I feel. Like, what are we talking, like, Attorney General here?
Yeah.
You can't vote for the Attorney General out of spite. So definitely a minus as far as Rand is concerned. And as far as Sessions, I'm not a big fan. I'll be completely honest and say I don't know for certain, but I feel that he's probably a racist. And his track record as a prosecutor and everything that he's done before his time in Congress has led me to that belief. So I don't particularly feel comfortable with having someone being Attorney General who doesn't, apply the law equally. Yeah, and doesn't look at the law equally.
I definitely agree. I don't know if I'll go as far as to say he's a racist, because some of the racist things people were associating with, like one was clearly a joke about the KKK and this KKK trial, and that's what I talked about in an earlier episode.
I'm not even talking about that. That's basically like conjecture. I'm talking about like what he did as a prosecutor and what things that he supported, like the 100-to-1 crack cocaine disparity, where you get 100 times the sentence if you have crack versus cocaine.
Oh yeah. Oh
which
no,
is,
without a doubt.
Unequivocally affects the African American community, and his refusal to let black judges on the federal bench in Alabama, and all sorts of things that he has a lot of skeletons in his closet, and there's too much smoke for there not to be fire as far as he's concerned. I'm fairly certain he's a racist.
Well, I hadn't heard about the Alabama judges. Do you have anything a little bit more you can tell us about that?
Well, I can't say in any detail, right? Because I just read it in passing like a few weeks ago.
Okay, yeah. That's one thing I hadn't heard about. Obviously, he is awful on justice reform, criminal justice reform. He is awful on the war on drugs, and he is without a doubt a supporter of what we were talking about earlier with asset forfeiture. And I remember one thing I was equating with is that even though he had tried to distance himself from the KKK, The comparison I made was that by all of the actions that he's taken and his support of the existing way that we have justice and the war on drugs, what's so different than, you got a bunch of thugs kicking in your door that are still going to take away your life? Whether it's the KKK or the DEA, the tactics are the same, and oftentimes the end result is very similar. So yeah, I'm no fan of Sessions either.
Yeah, Jeff Sessions is very much in favor of the jackbooted goon method of justice. Yeah. And that can't possibly be good for anyone.
Yep, agreed. Well, I agree with you. It is a definite minus when it comes to Rand supporting Sessions. They were saying maybe he was doing it for political reasons, where he wants to come back stronger on a different nominee later that he hates even more. But, taking in one, taking the lesser evil is still not a position anybody should be advocating for. If they're both evil, you should still not vote for him. And yeah, even though it did crack me up that Rand took the position that he was voting for Sessions just because he was so aggravated with the slander and character assassination that was performed, that's still not a reason. You gotta vote against a man who is clearly not going to stand up and do what's right as far as we're concerned in many situations. So.
Yeah, I'm generally in favor of doing things out of spite, but I feel like the stakes are a little too high in this instance.
Yeah, I started this entire podcast out of spite.
Yeah, exactly.
I was pissed off at Odie and Mark for having their shows. I said, screw you guys. Do my own podcast with blackjack and hookers. All right, man. Well, that's it. Any other thoughts at the end of the pod? Otherwise, I'm going to say my goodbyes.
Well, I think I've said my piece.
All right. And it was a wonderful piece. Thank you, JB, for coming on the show. I will definitely have you back on now that we've broken the ice. And and so, guys, from JB and I here at Electric Libertyland, always stay plugged in to Liberty.